It sounds strange, but for a century, psychologists have been studying why people lie, manipulate, and betray the people closest to them. And they keep finding the same thing. These behaviors rarely come from nowhere, and they're often driven by predictable psychological patterns. And that's where Spoke comes in, because with Spoke, these psychological patterns are what define his character as a whole. Because on paper, Spoke's actions look random. One episode, he'll betray his closest allies, and the next, he'll risk everything for power, and later he seems genuinely capable of changing. But when you look beneath the surface, there's actually a surprisingly consistent psychological pattern behind almost every major decision he makes. Spoke has always been an interesting character. Since day one, he's been unconventional, going down a path of evil, using exploits to gain power and control over the server. I mean, we saw this on Lifesteal, where he used exploits to destroy the entire server. So when it came to the Unstable SMP, Spoke was obviously going to be tempted when he found similar exploits. And these exploits opened up the opportunity for him to gain power on a server where others were more skilled than him in every other category. But these exploits don't just make him feel like he leveled the playing field. No, they make him feel a sense of grandiosity. Grandiosity is defined as an unrealistic, inflated sense of self-importance, power, or superiority. In essence, Spoke felt like he was at the top of the world and that nothing could stop his reign of power. And Spoke has always felt this way, willing to break and ruin the server for everyone else as long as it meant that he would be happy and fulfilled. And he does everything to maintain that. For example, he used the Wonders to disguise his attempts at exploiting and building the wormhole prison to store his exploited items, both of which demonstrate his greed for maintaining the chokehold that he had on the server, as everyone else tries to stop him. His superiority complex is what pushes him so strongly to defend his game-breaking gear without attempting to hear the other side of the argument, and not understanding the true consequences of his actions. Building on top of his egotistical and power-hungry character, Spoke often disregards others, which is characterized by his constant manipulation. Spoke often disguises his evil acts behind a facade, often utilizing tactics of manipulation to get his way. When discussing Spoke's manipulative behavior, the most prominent example that appears over and over again is his treatment of Mapicc. And for good reason, because when JamatoP offered Mapicc and Zam freedom from Spoke's dangerous behavior, Mapicc was overjoyed. Spoke, however, realizing that he was losing his closest ally, posed as Leowook and attacked Mapicc, pushing Mapicc into a state of terror, and back into Spoke's control. Basically, in order to maintain his power over his friend, Spoke had to resort to creating a false sense of fear and instilling it in Mapicc. However, his acts of manipulation don't just stop with Mapicc. In fact, it encompasses every relationship he ever had. For example, during the Bat Arc, Spoke wanted to infiltrate their rival and take down their leader, but he soon realized that the task would be too dangerous and could jeopardize his safety, so instead he targeted Flamefrags. By convincing him that they were equal partners and showering him with praise, he was able to build up Flame's confidence. And once Spoke had Flame in the palm of his hand, he outsourced all of his bat tasks to him, leading Flame to risk his life while Spoke stayed safe. And then it gets even worse, as Spoke takes credit for all of Flame's hard work when he presents the completed tasks as his own accomplishments. So not only did Spoke manipulate Flamefrags into doing his dirty work for him, but also undermine his work as a whole. So clearly, whenever Spoke isn't getting his way, he resorts to immoral and evil tactics to maintain his control, a defining character that is seen throughout Spoke's journey time and time again. However, these moments in Spoke's journey reveal a trait that is rooted deep inside Spoke's mind: paranoia. Spoke is always paranoid, and the trait completely engulfs his character. His distrust goes as far as not trusting his friends, and thus he never forms real relationships. For example, in the How I Stole 10,356,000 Duped Items video, Mapicc gains tons of resources which Spoke didn't provide or control. This marks a moment where Mapicc begins becoming less dependent on Spoke as he has his own resources now. And although this seems great, and Spoke should be ecstatic with the growth of his friend, he sees it as a potential threat to their relationship and his own position. And this paranoia is what drives him to act aggressively, because instead of celebrating Mapicc's newfound strength, Spoke feels the power dynamic shifting out of his favor. And in order to address and lessen his paranoia, he demands the items, masking his extortion as a test of Mapicc's loyalty. By stripping Mapicc of his autonomy, Spoke forces him back into becoming dependent. In essence, Spoke didn't want his friend to succeed because he wanted to maintain control over him, and the easiest way to do so was to keep Mapicc in the palm of his hands, where he could see everything that he does and control everything that he has as an input, essentially confining him to doing whatever Spoke wanted. So far, we've seen 3 of Spoke's character traits: grandiosity, manipulation, and his constant paranoia. But why does he do this? Why is he always manipulating, and why is he always paranoid? Well, it's crucial to realize that Spoke is doing all of this for one reason: to maintain his reputation. Because the reason behind his constant manipulation, aggression, and lack of empathy is that Spoke only truly cares about himself and how he's perceived. There's countless examples of Spoke exhibiting these traits, but even zooming into just few of them gets the point across. Once, Spoke accidentally burned down a village, but rather than admitting to what he did and taking accountability for his actions, he griefs the players who used that village by killing them. Furthermore, when a witness of the massacre tries to escape, Spoke instantly kills them. And after cleaning up the evidence of his behavior, he promptly leaves. However, as LeoWook starts to investigate the village and question Spoke, Spoke starts to spew lies to prevent himself from becoming a suspect. It doesn't really matter though, because Spoke later down the road figures out there's records in which he's acknowledged as the one who destroyed the village, and that LeoWook wants to hunt him down for this.
It was confirmed burning down a village with dozens of inhabitants. Not only did he burn it, but dropped lava on every house and is suspected of killing 12 of the witnesses. What? I thought I had a good alibi for that.
Upon learning this, the feud between LeoWook and Spoke expands into something far greater, a conflict that kills more spies and eventually extends to a war. And it's crazy to think that all of this conflict could have been prevented if Spoke wasn't selfish. In an effort to not taint his reputation, Spoke directly caused deaths, destruction, and large conflict. And sure, this could be just dismissed as a one-time instance, but he does this over and over again. He's always trying to upkeep his reputation. Because another time we can see him trying to keep his reputation up is when he handles his pet fish George Jr. Because while people literally fight wars over the deaths of their pet dogs on SMPs, Spoke is quite the opposite. His careless behavior with George Jr. led to the death of the fish. However, Spoke, being the villain that he is, simply replaced the fish with a new one, eventually accumulating a full shulker box of George Jr.'s.
The aquarium.
Yo, can you put the block back?
What?
Look me in the eye.
Oh, those are your...
No. Don't tell Mapicc.
And although this quote may seem playful at first, it actually goes much deeper than that. You see, Spoke's concern about Mapicc finding the George Jr. shulker suggests that he values Mapicc's perception of him. And it makes sense because throughout the arc, Spoke repeatedly frames himself as someone who cares about Mapicc and builds his relationship on a foundation of trust. So if he were to be exposed as someone who treats his pets carelessly and his relationships carelessly, he would pose a threat to the portrayal of himself that he would like to maintain. This explains why he's always trying to maintain control, not just for power, but in order to maintain his reputation. But what explains why he's paranoid all the time? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to the Spoke exploit arc, when Jamato and Spoke were very close and worked together as a duo to exploit. A time where Jamato even gifted Spoke an iconic glitched chest plate. However, as Spoke became more and more obsessed with power, he began heavily relying on and using these game-breaking exploits and illegal mechanics, eventually leading Jamato's views to differ. Spoke wanted to maximize his power and control over the Unstable SMP, while Jamato saw what Spoke was doing as a risk to the entire server. This divide in views caused Spoke to panic, as Jamato was his closest ally at the time and knew what game-breaking power Spoke had and how he got it. Spoke knew this, and mentally, he saw the worst. He thought that Jamato's warnings were a threat, and it terrified him into believing that his former partner was going to strip away his power and turn on him. So when you look at Spoke's journey as a whole, his actions stopped looking so random. His grandiosity pushed him to seek power beyond what anyone else had at the time, and his manipulation allowed him to control the people around him, and his paranoia made him see all of his relationships as a possible threat. But deeper than that, Spoke is pushed by a desire to control how others see him, and that's what makes his character so interesting, because Spoke's greatest enemy had always been the gap between who he wanted everyone to believe he was and who his actions actually showed him to be. In essence, Spoke's greatest enemy has always been himself.